today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. What was Jasmina Sota's decision win over a very game, very aggressive Chloe Watson? The prediction stuck. I went with Jasmina to win. Using the same winning strategy that won her the Maisie Rose fight, I figured that strategy would also work on Chloe Watson because Jasmina is the comparatively taller, longer fighter. In a manner of speaking, that's how she likes to fight, using her length, whereas Chloe is more of a mid-range fighter. She's got to get in close before she can do anything, before anything happens, and Jasmina isn't going to let that happen, staying on her toes, moving around. I would say comparatively, Chloe Watson did a better job of pressuring Jasmina than Maisie Rose did. Better, though still not good enough. By the end of it, I had Jasmina up by about 2 or 3 rounds. Moving around, staying on her toes, walking Chloe into punches and staying off the ropes. Spinning out, forcing Chloe to give chase, and unable to set her feet to let hard punches go. It was a great display of boxing from Jasmina. But I thought you didn't like outside fighters. In a very general sense, I don't, but what you'll notice about Jasmina that's different from Sky Nicholson, for example, is Jasmina throws more punches. She does let her hands go. She's not as economic, pot-shotting, only throwing 1 and 2 punches at a time. She was busy. Busy enough that she's not getting outworked by Chloe Watson, busy enough that the fight was still entertaining. And Jasmina, unlike a Sky Nicholson, shows a bit more in terms of inside game. She'll mix it up in the pocket, here and there, to assert herself and fight the other girl off, fight off Chloe Watson. Just enough and not too much that she's getting drawn into a war. She really is at her best on the move, on her toes, and on the outside. She can use those long levers. She is now the EBU Flyweight champion. You can tell she puts the work in the gym. Oftentimes, finesse fighters like Jasmina Sota, when under pressure, their fitness tends to fail them, and once it does, everything else starts to unravel, whereas Jasmina was able to keep her shape for the entirety of the fight, which is a testament to not just her boxing, but her fitness. Physicality is just as important. You can be a finesse fighting kind of fighter in the opening stanza, but as a fight progresses, you got to be able to stay that fighter. When the punches are getting in, the damage is settling in, and the pressure is on, and you have an opponent that won't leave you alone. Chloe Watson didn't want to leave Jasmina alone, but Jasmina did a good job of weathering the storm, now EBU champion, in what is a very deep flyweight division. Yeah, this is where Gabby Fundora reigns as undisputed champion. Being honest, I don't think anybody beats Gabby Fundora at this weight. I don't. But at the same time, I don't know how much longer Gabby Fundora is going to stay at this weight. It's my understanding she has an upcoming title defense against Mexico's own Marilyn Badillo, ranked number 3 in the division by BoxRec. Jasmina comes in at number 11, a ways to go before cracking the top 5. Still one of the best. Definitely. But if I don't think Jasmina has what it takes to topple Gabby Fundora, it's because the winning strategy that worked on Maisie Rose and Chloe Watson this past weekend wouldn't work on Gabby because Gabby's literally taller and longer than Jasmina with more punching power, stopping power. That's what Jasmina doesn't have. Gabby does. So Jasmina can shake and bake. Most other fighters at this weight, save the one that's got all the belts. Jasmina stands a better chance of winning a belt if she doesn't have to deal with Gabby to get one. And maybe she won't. Because as stated, Gabby's undisputed, and I don't see a whole lot of reason to stick around at flyweight beyond the Marilyn Badillo fight. So if she moves up and drops all the belts after that, maybe Jasmina can pick one up. That's her best bet. For now, congratulations to her. I felt she had all the right ingredients to beat Chloe Watson and give her her first professional loss, and she's done just that. 2 unbeaten scalps in a row. Her resume is coming along nicely. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, Lamont Roach reacts to the New York State Athletic Commission ruling on the Gervonta Davis fight. We all know they decided to let the draw stand, even though they acknowledge that there were errors committed by Steve Willis and that it should have been counted as a knockdown, they're not going to do anything about it. Lamont Roach Jr. says that he is not surprised but disappointed at the New York State Athletic Commission's decision to uphold the result from his fight against Gervonta on March 1st. Roach, 25-1 with 2 draws and 10 knockouts, put his reign as WBA super featherweight champion on hold to move up to lightweight and challenge Tank for his WBA bauble. A heavy underdog beforehand, Roach ripped up any pre-fight predictions and assumptions that Davis would win and prove too much for the 29-year-old. Too much. Not enough. The bout ended in a majority draw, but there was a huge controversy surrounding the fight following the events of round 9. During the round, Roach appeared to catch Davis with a shot, who then took a brief knee. Before going to his corner to get his face wiped, referee Steve Willis started to give Davis an 8 count, but then stopped, ruling that it was not a knockdown. You know that I think if boxing were more of a mainstream sport in this country, perhaps the New York State Athletic Commission would have decided to uphold the rules of play, of engagement. But the last 2 decades or so, boxing has become more and more of a niche sport to where the outrage isn't all that outrageous. Even though Gervonta Davis's excuses were, Davis afterwards said that grease from his hair had ran down into his eyes and needed cleaning up. Gervonta's supporters immediately accepted that piss-poor excuse, and what comes to mind is Shernika Johnson's fight with Susie Ramadan when Shernika had all that blood streaming down her face. She didn't get to stop in the middle of the round or the middle of the fight to get toweled down. And what about the Serrano versus Cruz fight? That bloodbath. They didn't get to halt the action either. Rules for thee, but not for me. Judges Glenn Feldman, Eric Marlinsky, and Steve Weisfeld scored the contest 114-114, 113-115, and 114-114 respectively. The 9th round was scored 10-9 to Davis by Feldman and Marlinsky, while Weisfeld gave it to Davis. On Friday, the New York State Athletic Commission reviewed the fight following a protest from Roach's team, but chose to uphold the original result. The outcome, therefore, was not overturned. Roach, whose reputation is soared because of his performance, responded to the outcome on X saying, "I'm not surprised about the decision by the New York State Athletic Commission. A little disappointed, yeah, especially when they acknowledged the fact that Steve made the wrong calls in the 9th, but I wasn't banking on the overturn. Everyone knows I won the fight, and I'm satisfied with that." Not to mention the potentiality of a rematch. Did go into this thing with a rematch clause that he seems to have exercised. Can he do that even though it was scored a draw? The way rematch clauses work, there has to be a winner and there has to be a loser. In this instance, there wasn't. I remember when Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury fought for the first time. They had dual rematch clauses, but because their fight was scored a draw, Tyson Fury was able to abscond. He didn't have to go right into another fight with Wilder. He signs the Top Rank and has 2 fights over there instead before he sees Wilder again. That's because the fight was scored a draw. There was no winner and no loser. It's the same deal here. This fight was scored a draw. Though I suppose it's neither here nor there because Lamont is receptive to a second fight. He seems to want to go into a second fight, and they're moving along with that. I don't imagine he's going to make much more money in the second fight than he did in the first, because if they went as far as incorporating a rematch clause, planning ahead, they likely plant the splits too, the money. He's not going to make much more than he did before. Still going to be the B-side. The second fight will be bigger than the first, irrespective of whatever the first fight brought in at the box office, and we still don't know. A preliminary set of numbers hasn't come down, but I don't expect to be impressed. A ballpark figure. We don't have that yet, but I don't expect that this fight sold any more than the Frank Martin fight did. Before that, last year, this wasn't a fight anybody was asking for, irrespective of how it turned out going in. Well, they did a good gate. Yeah, well, Gervonta Davis usually does good gates. It's box office numbers we're talking about, pay-per-views, and I do not imagine they sold very many pay-per-views with this. The second fight will do better. Because this one has backstory. The first fight didn't. And because Gervonta has to redeem himself, people want to see if he can. While Hall of Fame inductee and former 2-division champion Timothy Bradley says, Gervonta Davis is not overrated. Come on, Tim. We've seen this happen to guys before. Why is it supposed to be different when it's Gervonta? A week removed from Gervonta Davis' shocking draw against Lamont Roach, Timothy Bradley does not think Davis got exposed or that the judges were particularly out of line calling the fight a draw, but he does think Tank is probably a bit disappointed in himself. Tank is not overrated or anything like that. I know a lot of people are saying that. Well, this guy can beat him. No. Styles make fights, guys, Bradley told Boxing Scene.
What's so hard to figure out about Lamont Roach's style that Jamel Herring didn't figure out, Tim?
I hate that we still have to do this. No, people don't decide that these guys' Gervonta fights are any good until after the fact. A 20-1 underdog going in, a guy who nobody's really giving a shot.
Not beforehand.
But afterwards, it's supposed to be different. When Gervonta Davis can't live up to the expectations you set before him, are we going to elevate Lamont Roach to pound-for-pound status now so that Gervonta Davis can be spared criticism?
He's overrated, Tim.
And they do this with everybody that he fights. They don't decide that these guys are anybody until after he fights them.
I saw Keith Thurman doing it with Isaac Pitbull Cruz.
Still think Shakur hasn't beaten people like Tank. I mean, Shakur hasn't even been in with Isaac Cruz.
What's his claim to fame?
Come on.
Before Isaac Pitbull Cruz loses to Gervonta Davis, what was his claim to fame? And afterwards?
What, because he beat Rolly? And what was Rolly's claim to fame?
Getting beaten by Gervonta Davis?
It's a goddamn circle jerk.
Timothy Bradley continued. I think it was a shocker to everyone if you put Roach's biggest win, the same guy that Tank fought, Hector Luis Garcia, the triangle thing in boxing, it really doesn't work. But I'm just saying, it's like Tank knocked this guy out, the same guy Roach went life or death with, and he needed a knockdown in order to win the fight. Bradley was especially impressed by Roach's ability to trade punches with Davis and take the return fire. It was crazy, because Roach became the puncher. It was so interesting. There wasn't a moment in the fight where I was like, oh, Roach is hurt badly. He was stung, but not hurt badly. There were spots in the fight where I was like, Tank is buzzed, and it's extremely noticeable.
Lamont Roach did not become a puncher, Tim.
Nobody suddenly becomes a puncher. What happened is, ahead of the fight, you overestimated Gervonta Davis's ability so that when he's losing exchanges to a super featherweight, you don't want to call a spade a spade. Tank is overrated.
It's not a new and improved Lamont Roach. He's the same guy that he always was. Gervonta just isn't what you think he is.
I knew that Tank usually turns it up after 4. He was getting competition, all he could handle from Roach, so it was like, are we going to see Tank explode right now and really put it on Roach? And he couldn't. I mean, he tried, but he couldn't. Roach was so game. What people need to realize is that scoring a fight live and scoring a fight on TV are two different things, he said. Those scorecards, to me, were top-notch. These judges are the best in the business.
It's a little hard to sell me on that, Tim. When the New York State Athletic Commission themselves acknowledge Steve Willis made a mistake, and that should have been a knockdown.
So it's not like we have rookie judges on the cards. To have it 114-114 is respectable.
Well, it wouldn't have been 114-114 if Steve Willis would have done his job, Tim.
To have it go towards Tank is respectable in my opinion, although I think Tank lost.
You and the rest of the world, Tim.
It doesn't matter where you look. You can conduct an independent poll yourself, and what you're going to find is it's going to come back overwhelmingly in favor of Lamont Roach. So what are you trying to convince us of? Tim, you're the same guy who's very critical of Canelo Alvarez, who's a hell of a lot more accomplished than Gervonta.
Why are you giving Gervonta Davis all of this understanding that you don't give Canelo?
You often hear me say that scarcity creates value, and at a time when there's a scarcity of American superstars, I mean homegrown American fighters that move the needle, Gervonta Davis is the closest thing.
To some people, America doesn't have much of anything going on in the heavyweight division, the cruiserweight division, or the light heavyweight division.
You can forget about super middle because we all know who the biggest draw at super middleweight is. We all know who the king of the castle is.
Junior middle's got some guys, but they ain't stars. It's the same at welter. It's the same at junior welter.
Some guys there too, but they ain't stars. To where the reason that so many people are so overprotective of Gervonta is because to them, it's all America has.
But I'm American and I don't give a shit about any of that. He's a hype job, Tim.
How the hell is your name Tank and you're getting outlanded, you're getting outfought in the pocket by a goddamn super featherweight who's not even known for power?
Lamont has less knockouts than Shakur Stevenson, Tim.
No, a guy doesn't suddenly become a puncher. What can happen all of a sudden is another guy who pretends to be a puncher gets exposed.
A guy who needs weight stipulations to handicap his opponents, or a guy who brings up opponents from the lower weights so he can seem like a bigger puncher than what he is.
All of that is a hell of a lot more likely than Lamont Roach suddenly turning into George Foreman. Let's just cut the crap, Tim. Stop protecting this kid's image. Lamont Roach struck Gervonta Davis with a grazing right hand followed by 2 jabs in the ninth, the latter of which Bradley believes was responsible for Davis's eye issues that led to him taking a knee. There's no excuse for Tank saying that. I didn't know the rules concerning a knockdown, Bradley said. That's not an excuse. You're a professional. You've been in the game long enough to understand.
Then how is he not overrated, Tim? If you think Lamont won, and you think that should have been a knockdown,
and you think the excuses that Gervonta Davis made afterward are unacceptable, then how is he not overrated?
isn't that the definition of overrated?
If you want to understand how scarcity creates value, look at the yards of bubble wrap they're using to protect Gervonta Davis and his image. You can't give every other fighter a hard time when they look less than perfect, then all of a sudden become so understanding of Gervonta.
Keep the same energy.
You thought he was gonna knock this guy out before the fight like the rest of the world, so that when he doesn't...
The world don't change. It's your perception of him that should.
I can't stress that enough. Guys, don't all of a sudden become punchers. Not all of a sudden. What can happen suddenly is a guy ends up with more than he bargained for, and he gets exposed for it.
Because he's been on easy street for too long. You know that the hardest punch of the fight was a right-hand counter from Lamont Roach that sent Gervonta Davis careening with that glazed-over look in his eyes. This from a guy with, 10 knockouts?
Lamont is not known as a puncher at his own weight, let alone Gervonta's. So if he goes up there and he does all this, you need to look at Gervonta in a different light and stop protecting him.
He's the one who's supposed to protect himself at all times. Ain't that the golden rule?
This is not the hill you want to die on, Tim.
Not for this butterball.
The rematch is en route. That much we know. But if this kid were everything you guys make him out to be, we wouldn't even be here, and there wouldn't be a need for a second fight.
You used to ask this guy to fight Shakur Stevenson. Now you're telling us he's not overrated.
So let's see if he can actually finish the job and finish his food next time.